Thanks for joining me for a productive conversation.
It's good to be here. You know what? I feel so much more productive all of a sudden. Is that just because I see you on the screen? Is that why that is like that?
Well, and
It's
I
hard
think
to
we
sit here. I got to go do something.
not yet. Wait at least another 30 minutes or so before you take off. So like I was saying before we jumped on and had you join us, I've been following your work for quite some time. Boundaries, of course, is one of your works. I mean, you've written quite a bit, but and we're going to allude to necessary endings when we get into the heart of the conversation here as well. But can you share before we get into the meat of things, so that I don't butcher it, the metaphor around the rose bushes and the pruning aspect of things, because I think that that's a lesson. Well, and it does. You kind of get into it a little bit in here without going too deep. But can you share that really quickly before we dive into the deeper conversation around this book?
Well, the short version is I wrote a book called Necessary Endings. And basically, there are certain things it is necessary for you to end them if you're going to get, to where you want to go. And and so as I began to look for a guiding metaphor that's useful, pruning was a great one. And because pruning is about necessary endings, this branch has got to end. We got to end its life, and so I actually got into the science of this. I went and visited botanists. I flew to Tuscany to meet with the number one winemaker in the world because
Mm.
they know about pruning. And basically, here's what I learned. He goes, "Well, you don't go out there and just start pruning." Now that's what we always did at our house because we drive over the front of the house. Like, crap, we can't see the house anymore. It's time to prune the trees, right? But that's not what he said. He said, no, you prune towards a vision. So you got to know, you go to the rose bush, the gardener's got to know, what does a champion rose look like? And that's what I'm pruning towards. So then what they do is, first of all, it is a discipline. It's not just when things are bad. They do it regularly in three contexts. Number one, they look at all of the buds and branches. And there's a lot of beautiful blooms there and buds and flowers, but they look at them and they say, these are good, but which ones are the best? And they cut away all of the good, maybe healthy stuff, but it's not the one that has or the ones that have the chance of becoming what they really want, the champion. That's the vision. And there's a reason for that. All these other meetings and all these other product lines and all these other activities are taking resources away from the vine that if you're going to produce the best has got to have those resources. So they trim those. The second context, there are a bunch of branches and buds that they're sick and they're not getting well. You've gotten them coaches, you've had performance reviews, you've gone alongside of them, you've given them new tools, and they're just not going to, for whatever reason, get with the program and they have to go away. And then the third one is just a bunch of dead stuff taking up space. And so in businesses or lives, what we do is we look at all the stuff we're doing and what really is going to produce the life that I want or the company that I want. And we got to get rid of this other stuff. When Steve Jobs went back to Apple after being gone for 6 or 7 years, he walks around the building and there were 40 different versions of the Mac. And he said, this is crazy. And so what he did, went in a room, classic job style, screams at everybody, draws up on a whiteboard a 2 by 2 matrix, 4 squares on the top. He says, there's only two things that are important. Is this a desktop or is it portable? And is it personal or is it professional? We're going to make 4 computers and that's it.
Mm.
Those are the best. Prune all this other stuff. You go into a Mac store today, that's what you find. Different sizes and shapes and colors. Personal, professional, portable, desktop. That's pruning.
Did you ever get a chance to read the special Apple book that was released. I think it was like a couple of years ago. I think it was called like Make Something Different or whatever. That was only released on iBooks. I think it's
Yeah.
free. Like you can get it. It's really interesting. It's got his letters and his journals and stuff in it. So it has some
Oh, I heard it. I
insights.
think I glanced through that. Yeah.
Yeah. Because a friend of mine, he actually got like a physical copy of the book, which is gorgeous, right? And I think this would have been about three or 4 years ago, easily. But yeah, it's just, I mean, going through that and you see how the inner workings of things are. And this is actually really a nice segue into like the inner workings of, you bring the metaphor, the idea of the body into this. And this is not just for business either, your desired future. It's around the life stuff that you're talking about. And when I was reading it, one thing that came to mind when I was on the ferry home today. So I live on Vancouver Island in
Ah,
Victoria, and I was in
I can tell
Vancouver.
you one thing. There's
Yeah.
some holiday you guys have up there in the summer,
Yeah.
and if you're downtown having dinner and you're trying to get back on a cruise ship and you didn't realize it was your equivalent to our 4th of July,
It's Canada
you're
Day.
not gonna
Yeah.
get back to the cruise ship on time to make it, and your kids are in the nursery and the ship takes off. I
So
know that.
you've done the Alaska cruise that had to stop in Victoria. You did it. It would have been Canada Day, July 1st, right? So it's right
That
around the
was
same
it.
time. Yeah.
My
But
kids are on the ship, and the thing is like they're lifting the drawbridge, and we dived into
that video would be on TikTok nowadays, right? Like you're the cruise ship is leaving without us. But so yeah, but that's the one we pay. I call it the island tax, right? Where like if you have to go to Vancouver for an event, and that's where I was. If you want to be back in time, you got to catch that early ferry. So I was up nice and early, and while on the way over, I've got like 95 minutes. So I'm going through my notes and reading the book again, and right out of the gate. So I yesterday when I was over in Vancouver, I had breakfast with my friend Steve Dotto, who a lot of people who are watching this or listening to this know Steve or know of his work. And he's like, "Look, I'm picking you up at the ferry, and we're gonna go, and we're gonna. I got to take my dog to the dog park though. So can you join me for that?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And of course, I'm going through the book again this morning, and you're bringing up Finley, right? And as I'm reading it, I'm remembering like Steve is saying, okay, so my dog, like this is what it expects. It knows where it's going. This is what you do with the ball. This is like, and it's like clockwork. And the dog is happier than anything, but that's a dog's life, right? And we were just chatting about that. And so as I'm going through this, like right out of the gate, um, Finley is not thinking about next Thursday, but we do have that capacity. So can you go into that a little bit? Because right out of the gate, I'm like, yeah, this is exactly how I felt yesterday, especially when I'm thinking, okay, when do we leave the dog park? And Steve's like, oh, she'll let us know. Like she'll be done like this. She's done it X number of times. That's her job. She'll let us know when she's done. She'll make her way to the gate, and it's like, okay, now it's time to go, Dad. And that's exactly what she did.
That's right. But that she's doing what she's wired to do, right?
Hmm.
I've never seen so we have a Doberman, her name's Finley. She does her job. Stranger comes to the door, she runs, just a scariest thing you've ever seen. But I've never seen her run to the door and bark to alert us that somebody's at the door. I've never seen her do that and stop and think, will that get me that bark? Will that get me closer to where I want to be on Thursday? That's reserved for the human species because we have a prefrontal cortex that can picture a future reality that does not exist today. Your sales numbers, the marriage you want to have, building a global enterprise, it does not exist. We have that capacity. But then, and this is what the book is about, it begins to organize and call in all the systems that are going to get you there. And there's no better model of performance than this thing we call the human body. I mean, AI is trying to be as good as it, but it's unbelievable. And so the human body does that on a path. And whether you're Steve Jobs or Bill Gates and do it in very different ways, these things are all present in the path. And that's what it's about.
Before we move on to these principles, that these components that I want to talk about, I want to bring up what M Porter 42, who I know is Michael. So it's nice to see Henry again. I saw him many times at Willow Creek. So really, really cool that you're joining us. And
Yeah.
back to the Steve Dotto story. Of course, Don Coven, Steve Dotto was on the Knowledge Network. So Steve was And still, he does a lot of stuff online. But back in the day, he was on TV, in on basically public access television in Canada, doing
Huh.
a lot of that stuff. It's kind of like what Leo Laporte would do in the United States. He was doing it in Canada. I want to talk about these 5 components. Now we're going to go into a little bit of them, but one of the things that I noticed when we were talking about them, we can touch on them. So the idea of where am I now and where do I desire to go? What talent outside of myself is needed to make it possible? How will I win? What's my strategy and plan to organize my energy? Energy is big for me, especially as a night owl who had to get up at 4:45 this morning to make sure I was
Oh,
back here in time.
you
Um,
should just stayed up.
yeah, probably. There's a nap in store for me later today. And how will I know I'm getting there and doing what is needed? And then am I fixing what's not working as soon as I find it? I know I went over those quickly, but what I want to say here is I think a lot of people go over those quickly. They don't make time and space for these. So how do you encourage someone? And obviously metaphor helps when people think about it in terms of the body, but how do you in your work, and even when you're working with leaders and stuff, how do you encourage them and make them understand that checking off boxes and just go, 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 fast, 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 now, now, now won't give you the time and space that's necessary to take these components into account?
Well, first thing you got to do is do what Finley never does. Finley doesn't run and bark. She's just doing it the way she does it, but she never stops and says, am I doing, first of all, where do I want to be next Thursday? But am I doing what will get me there? And so a lot of times we think we are. I'm a competitive golfer my whole life, and Tiger Woods has a great phrase: there's feel and there's real.
Mm,
And his teacher will say, move the club on this certain path. He goes, I am. Well, it might feel like it, but let's look at the video
yeah.
because it's what's real. And Mike, here's the problem. We build companies or teams or our own path of performance. We build them in our own image, which means the way we're wired to do it. But none of us is good at all 5. We're going to be drawn to and attracted to 2 or 3 of them. And the others are not going to get the meat and potatoes that they need. But you don't have to do all of them. You just got to make sure you're looking at the GPS and make sure in my enterprise or in my work or in my path, are all of these 5 things happening? Because if you miss one, you are not going to get the result you wanted.
Yeah, and I want to get to the measurable stuff in a little bit here too, because I think that there's interesting little obstacles or pitfalls or traps, I guess, that can happen along the way. One of the things I noticed when I was reading about vision was the idea of too many voices, right? So you're talking about like there's the way you've broken things down is like, and we're going to get to the bewares a little bit later in the book, but like, hey, you got to think about this, or you're thinking too small. You've got too many voices, and too many voices stood out to me because I find that sometimes when I'm looking for more thoughts, insights, feedback, etc., research, whatever, it feels like I'm almost looking for a reason not to do it. Like not to, you know what I mean? Like not
Mm.
to muddy up the clarity around the desire, to muddy up the vision. Like, oh, okay, well then I really shouldn't. How? What's one
That
way?
yeah,
Yeah,
it
go ahead.
brings up there's a real neurological principle of why you do that.
Okay.
Because the brain loves clarity. It cannot stand ambiguity.
Mm-hmm.
When we have ambiguity, by nature, that registers as an error to your brain because things are supposed to be like this. Okay. And if a new alternative or something comes in, now it's going, what? And as soon as that happens, if you're not regulated in some way, everybody knows this, the amygdala system kicks in, fight, flight, or freeze. In your case, well, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to fight. I'm going to withdraw or, avoid it. Other people start screaming at people. Other people just get paralyzed. That kicks in and thinking goes down. It's
Yeah.
designed that way. You don't want to be a train's coming at you thinking about how fast it's going. You want to react and dive off the track. But thinking goes down. And so the reason you do that is wired into you, right? And so there's something good in that you need to have filters of which voices, which options, all that stuff are going to be allowed to kind of cloudy the picture a little bit. Now, we want to cloudy the picture because that's how we get to the next level in innovation. But this filtering you're talking about, too many voices, I mean, there's no more paralyzed people than ones that have too many options.
What do they say? Well, I mean, working at Costco all those years, I remember. I mean, we would sell so much more stuff because there's less choice. The Toffler talks about overchoice, right? The idea of like if there's too many things, then it stalls everything. I
I'll tell
want
you
to,
what, I'll
yeah,
tell you another trick,
sure.
for all you online marketers. Um, you don't want 100. It's like, well, we're just going to give them two. Here's the low price and here's the upgrade. No, give them three.
Yeah.
Because when it goes binary, then you've got going on. And if they have three, they go, well, I want better than the just basic. This one's kind of enhanced, but I don't want to spend that much. And now I'm clear. I got something better and I'm not blowing the wallet. And you go,
Well, that's what Apple's done for years, right? With their laptops, right? Like you get the low end model, the high end, or the middle, and the middle is the one that sells the most because the low end doesn't have enough. It's missing one slight thing, right? Like either there's not enough storage or the memory's a little short, and then the one that's bigger is like it's got too much storage or the memory's too, or
oh, it's $12 million.
yeah, what's that? Right, right,
It's sort of like picking a prom date, right?
yeah, yeah.
Well, I don't want that one. And there's no way the homecoming queen's going with me. I'll take Susie. Or
I talk
or the female equivalent of
for
that she's
sure.
picking.
Um, Earlier on, I talked about like the idea of making time and space. I want to draw attention to the idea of like when you have to have other people around you, right? Like, and it doesn't like you can't go
And
anywhere on
let's
your own.
I'm gonna do a drop down window
Sure.
on that one.
Yeah, please.
What we need is other talent
Right.
around us. In
Right.
other words, the brain's not gonna get there by itself. It can't move. What it's gotta do is engage the particular talent that's needed to get it there. So any old person won't do. It's going to say, well, I'm going to need a couple of legs, going to need some eyes to focus, inner ear to balance, sends out the recruiting emails, asks those either friends or professionals or pay for or free people to come alongside and help them get there. But just, you know, people won't do it because my little finger really isn't important to where I'm going.
Yeah.
I got to find the particular talent. When Tom Brady went to Tampa Bay and they hadn't won in 14 years, he looked at the team and said, "There's four positions that are missing. There's people out there, but the talent's not there."
And he recognized the talent, right? That he could get.
Right.
Like Gronk was one of them, right?
Right.
I want to bring it back to your daughter because your daughter, and this allows us to put in the show notes too. The EP, which I listened to on the way home. I was driving home, and I'm like, oh, let's listen to it again, and it wonderful stuff. So we'll link to it. But can you tell a little bit about that story? Because I like as a parent myself, and especially because my son is into theater and I was into theater and he's also into engineering, and so I'm kind of like looking at it from the vantage point. I'm like, oh man, if he goes into theater, like that's great, but I don't want to push him in that direction. So I have
Yeah.
an avenue there. So it's you kind of my job, and as I was reading the passages, like to offer support, but I'm not the person that's gonna. I don't have the like you pointed out the talent to necessarily get him to that level if he
That's
even
right.
wants to go down that path. So you share the story about your daughter,
Yeah, what this illustrates is what we're talking about here in this path that I outline in the book. It's literally how people are wired to get from here to there. And it could be a teenager who, like her, had a dream of becoming a singer songwriter, or it could literally be launching a brand into a global enterprise. But it's just how things work. And so she comes to me one morning. I was in the kitchen, and she goes, "Dad." how do people get to be singer-songwriters? That's what I wanna do. And she's always kinda done that, but I never had her state it like that. "I'm ready for my career." And I said, "Well, let me tell you, Luce." And her name's Lucy. And so I go get my big whiteboard and drag it in. Her eyes roll. Oh, great. Here's another guy.
Yeah, it's the same eye roll we all get when we start to break that stuff down. But yes.
So anyway, I said, the first thing is vision. What do you want to look like? And Mike, I was amazed. It was so clear. It was so compelling. It was so everything that had to be there. And I said, well, that's great. Now, the second thing, Liz, you've got to what I call engage the talent that's needed to get there. And she looks at me and she says, well, Dad, you and Mom said I have talent. I said, Lucy, I'm not talking about your talent. I'm talking about the other talent. People have talent in areas that you don't have that can help you get there. And Mike, she instantly got it. She said, oh, I need a new guitar teacher because I'm not getting anywhere with the one I got. He got me to a certain level, but now I'm going on YouTube to figure out how to play different chords. I go, great. She said, and then she said, I need to start performing. I need to get auditions. I don't know how to get auditions. And so we hook up with some people who know the local playhouse scene and all this stuff. And then she says, I don't know how to produce an EP. And, I do it on GarageBand or whatever it is on her computer, but I need to be able to, I don't know how to do that. Well, here's where she really got lucky, because we're starting out there talking to people and we happen to know Kevin Jonas,
Mm.
the singer, the dad that produced, the voice. And he heard her sing and he goes, oh my gosh, I haven't heard that since Demi Lovato. I want to manage her. So he takes her on, and now we got some real talent around it, and she just moved down the path. And lo and behold, she releases her first songs, and a while later, she worked the path, and CBS Television bought it for a show. The CW television network bought it for a show. Spotify, Apple Music, all these new artists to watch. But I'm telling you, without a path, and this is nothing about her, but she would be one more talented person that's dreaming,
Yeah.
because she's not very, very linear. And, a lot of artists aren't.
Well, artists aren't good. Like Jim Croce is a great example. Great artist, was terrible at marketing, terrible
Yeah.
at promoting himself, right? Like there's
Yeah.
so many. And luckily we got, again, Lucy, Croce, like all these people, they managed to find that, like you said, that talent that has talent in that arena that they don't have to. Art and commerce don't mix very well typically.
Unless here's Mr. Art and Miss Commerce, and they
Yeah.
very different.
That kind of works. I want to.
But it's and here's what I wanna say before people go, "Well, crap, I don't I don't have a big budget to go hire consultants, and I don't have." All we're talking about is talent, okay? I'm on the board of a multi-billion-dollar company, and what he brought into his board was he didn't hire us, we're not in-house, but he has this advisory board of 4 people that come from very 4 important areas that are vital to his strategy and his business. Now, you may not have a multi-billion-dollar business where you can get certain people to come join you, but I've seen people just starting out, they have an advisory board too.
Mm.
And these are Uncle Joe knows somebody that started this company, or you got a friend at your church, or you've got a cousin or a pal or somebody on your soccer team. But it's just going to take talent joining you, volunteer or paid, the talent we don't have.
Yeah.
No human was designed to do everything.
I want to bring up John's question. John Beck, 7625. John, good to see you. Such good stuff. We're going to circle back to the pruning modes, which actually I was going to get to a little bit more here, especially when we get to the idea of strategy, because you bring up necessary endings in the strategy chapter. So he says, can
Yeah.
the 3 pruning modes work in volunteer-based organizations, or does it only work in for-profit context? I think I know the answer to this, but you go ahead.
That is such a great question. And they have to work or you're not going to get anywhere. But B, here's the big obstacle. And I'm going to tell you this, and you go test it. Whoever's leading that volunteer organization, they're afraid to start pruning because that's all the bodies I got.
Yeah.
And that is a normal human response. You go to any hoarder and start to get rid of something in the garage where they go, no, I might need that. Well, if it's not getting you where you want to go, then they're not getting you where you want to go. And so here's the thing volunteer organizations thrive on somebody leading it. Go back to the model that has a compelling vision.
Mm.
Now, what compelling does is it taps into desire. So finding volunteers that not are not just your answer to where you want the mission to go. The mission is their answer to where they want their life to have purpose in. Now that's where you start. And then you begin to figure out the talent that you're going to need. And you begin to say, here's what we need done. Who steps up? Who fits for what? And you run it the same way because here's the deal. The most engaged, and here's what we know about the research on volunteers. It is the 80-20 rule.
Mm. Yeah.
80% of the stuff's going to get done by about 20% of your volunteers.
Yeah.
And so what pruning helps you do is get the, as Jim Collins said, you get the right people in the right seats on the right bus. So you know where you're going, and then you've got to cast a vision, and then you've got to have requirements, and people are afraid to do this. You know, if you're going to volunteer, you got to be there every Thursday at the meeting. You got to do this, you got to do that. High performers thrive on expectations. And if somebody doesn't like an expectation, then, you know, go volunteer for, you know, the collection of sloths on a log and a pond that nobody goes to because results don't matter over there.
Yeah.
And the problem is usually we're afraid. We're afraid because they're not paying them. Well, most highly motivated people don't do it for the money.
Yeah.
Now, there's sometimes a certain level of, you know, they got to pay the bills, but a lot of highly paid performers move to a new startup and they give up big money because they want to go to the moon or to Mars with Elon. You know, it's
Purpose. Yeah.
yeah,
Meaning. Yeah. It's when I haven't really shared too much about this, but I used to be the operations manager at a local film festival here in Victoria. And it's a pretty big film festival. They've been around for over 20 years now. And we had volunteers, and the incentivization for them, number one, they got to see movies, which was big but they were movie fans. And you could tell who the volunteers were that were really high. Like they would show up. And what's interesting is they don't just show up for those. They would do the local fringe festivals and the other art stuff. So often you'll find, and that's the other thing, is that I found that we would collaborate with other arts organizations to see who the talent was that loved the arts, and we would kind of share volunteers, and it was like a
yeah.
seasonal kind of thing. So it worked out really well.
Okay, don't just skip over that.
No.
Because what some people might hear is you got your talent from the other arts organizations. No, the talent you engaged was the other arts organization.
That's, yes, valid. Very true.
That
Very true.
that who do I know that knows where the talent is? That was genius.
and worked, and I think it's still going on to this day that they've kept that kind of relationship going. I want to jump ahead to the strategy part and talk about those things. I alluded to it earlier. The things that we need to beware. You've got beware of frustration, beware of blind spots, beware denial, beware of the bubble, beware of the now. There's several things that you've got to beware. Which do you think of those when it comes to strategy and the strategy and the plan is maybe the trickiest, the one that slips people up, or maybe is a bit more insidious that you don't it kind of comes at you that you didn't anticipate, or you don't realize how much it's actually going to hurt the strategy or the plan?
Yeah, it's a good question. Probably the most insidious one is you start to do it like you've done it before. Is I know how to do this. Let's go. And that may not be what the context demands.
Right.
I give you a good example from my company that I started way back when. Did I have I already said this? I can't remember if I tell you about my hospital company.
No, 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 you haven't. So go ahead.
Yeah. So I was a clinician in private practice, and after about 4 or 5 years, my business juices were, I want to do something, and what I want to do was do a psychiatric hospital. There was also faith friendly because a lot of people of faith they go to a psych unit and their faith to be seen as part of the problem and not. And I just want to make it friendly to everybody. And so I thought the only way to do that is be in control of it is to own a hospital. So I'm in my 20s. I don't know how hard this is to go raise the money to buy a hospital. Well, that we couldn't get one to sell, so I morphed the model into going to existing med surg hospitals and convincing them to give me one of their units, and I'd market it, manage it, and blah blah blah.
Hmm.
Well, we start, we start, and John Townsend was doing it with me. We were clinicians, so we started this hospital treatment center company on the way that we know how to do things, right?
Yep.
And so we had a radio show where we're letting people know about it, and then people would call, and what do you do? Somebody calls your office as a doctor, you talk to them, and, you make an appointment and blah, 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 blah. Well, one night we're doing the radio show, and a friend invites his friend, and we don't know who he is, and he's listening to us, and afterwards we went to dinner, and he goes, "What you've guys got going here is you don't know what you have." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "This gang," he said, "Where's your call center?" I said, "What's a call center?" He goes, "Well, you're on the radio, you're generating all these calls." I go, "No, I know we only handle a few of 'em, and we make an appointment with the people that call." He goes, "No, you have to have a call center that helps the bridge to getting people from need treatment into treat." "What is that?" Well, it turns out he had run one of the big, way back treatment center chains in Southern California. And it was an unknown to us. We didn't even know what this was. We were just doing it the way our strategy was what, people refer to us and you treat them.
Mm.
Well, he, so here's what happened. I said, "Gosh, there's probably a lot else I don't know. Will you come do an audit of our operations?" And, and I hired him as a consultant for a month. He had just retired. And he comes in, he said, "This is incredible." I said, "Well, what do we need?" He said, "You need somebody like me, somebody who knows what y'all don't know about strategy and how to do this." And I said, "Well, you want to join us?" And he goes, "No, I just retired." But then I got him into the compelling vision of this, and he came on. And now we got talent in the house we didn't have. Long story short, when he came on, we had one hospital. We ended up in 45 markets in the Western United States and 4 states, and were there for about 10 or 12 years before managed care started kind of changing the industry and I sold the company. But it never would have gotten scaled
Yeah.
because I didn't know enough to know that my strategy was limited by what I didn't know.
Yeah. That's incredible. Great.
It's
Wow.
Medici effect.
Yeah.
we don't know what other industries are doing stuff that would apply to us, and nobody in our industry is doing this, but it
Wow.
applies.
I want to talk about measuring. I want to make sure you get a couple more questions around the other steps. So around accountability, you touched on it earlier, and it permeates throughout, right? The idea of measuring. And one of the pitfalls I find in productivity is that we get too obsessive with quantifiables, right? We get to the point of, how many boxes did we check off? Let's get to inbox zero, right? Because it's numerical. It's easy, right? Because you can count
Oh,
numbers and all that stuff.
whoa, 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 whoa.
The-
Well,
it's- yeah,
no,
yeah, let's
hold
go because I want to figure out what we don't what we don't measure. Like where do we have to when it comes to improper measuring? I think that's an interesting place to go. But yeah, go ahead.
wait a
You're
minute.
gonna
One of
tell me.
my
You're gonna
inboxes
tell your inbox.
one of my inboxes, okay, are you ready for
Sure.
this? It's got 160,000 unopened emails.
There you
If
go.
I tried to get that thing to 0, I would never accomplish anything.
Well, because you're swimming upstream, regardless, even without that number, you're swimming
And
upstream.
somebody else would stream.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. So what? So when it comes to measurement, like you going through the book of like what the importance of measurement, but when it comes to measuring either the wrong things or improperly measuring, do you have some insights around that?
Yeah, one of the things that we first of all, we think of measurement and accountability as a negative thing. It is the most positive thing ever because all it does in the positive sense, what it's designed to do is help you get there. When a pilot takes off to go from LA to New York, she would never take off without her measurement and accountability systems to tell her one thing above all. The plan dictated a few important things: speed, altitude, direction. My accountability systems measure, am I doing the things that I said I was going to do that are going to get me to the vision? There's a bunch of other stuff that could be measured, but no, I got to know if I'm measuring what actually moves the needle. Now, here's a big problem people do. They measure in relation to the goal. Here's the monthly revenues we're going to hit, this and the other, have this accountability meeting. How many of you sold? How many of you sold? Oh, we're blah. And they send them back out there. Well, go try harder. Right? First of all, they haven't even really drilled down to figure out what are the specific activities that move the needle. That's what you want to be measuring. And if you're just measuring the goal, that's like looking at the scoreboard at the end of the game. It's too late. But if you're measuring in the right cadence, are we doing what we said we were going to do? And if we are we getting the results we expected? And if we aren't, then we got to change the activities. But if we are, then we need to pull on the gas and hire more people to do the same thing, right? But only your measurement and accountability can do that. And what you got to do is make sure you are looking at the specific activities that move the needle. That's what's important. Don't measure too many things,
Yeah.
but don't not measure the right things. So, I've been in operating rooms with open heart surgery because we're looking at the team and how the team functions. It's one of the best places to learn about teams. That surgeon, there's just a few numbers they want to know about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and speaking of like again the hospital idea, because this is another thing that comes up a lot is people say triage. I've got to triage this. I got to triage that. And in the book, this is one of the things I'm like, yes, I like circled that. It's the only heading I like circled and didn't even worry about the rest of the text because I read the rest of the text over. Do you know? Do you even? You could have said, do you even know how to triage? Like even know how to triage? Because there's a lot of people that when they look at triage, they it's not about moving things to where they need to be. They're like, I'm going to do it right here, right now for everything, much like we're talking about the measurements. So can we touch on the idea of triage? Because let's face it, you've got more expertise in triage probably than anybody that's listening to this, and certainly more than I do who's asking you the question.
Well, I have worked emergency rooms, right? So I've been in those shifts. But what triage does is, you got 10 people that walk in the door. all of them are sick and all of them need something, treatment. They wouldn't be there, right? But the first thing you do is you're looking at what's a life-threatening vital issue. Now, these might be life-threatening too, but they're not urgent and vital. In other words, if we don't tend to this now, this guy's going to the morgue.
Right.
Right?
Like cardiac
But
stuff,
this,
you look at very differently than other things, right?
now, high blood pressure is going to get somebody to a morgue also, but you got a little time to
Mm,
play with.
right.
And there are some things you go, dude, go home and take a Tylenol. That's nothing. You don't even spend resources on. But what you're doing is you got categories that help you to filter. And that's why, by the way, a lot of stuff, back to necessary endings and pruning,
Mhm.
a lot of stuff, who cares
Yeah.
really? Now, somebody in your organization cares, but just because somebody cares doesn't mean that you have to care because you're the leader.
Right.
And a lot of people tell you, this is important. Have you done this? And you go, yeah, that'd be nice for somebody, but here's what we're focusing on. And the most important thing, word that, all the strategy experts will tell you this, the most important strategy word is the word no.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Because
actually find that, yeah.
all sorts of activities and we should do this. And look what somebody called, they got an opportunity. No, we're triaging what we are doing to keep this thing alive and thriving first. And then there's secondary and tertiary. But that's what triaging is.
Last question, because we're in that final phase, because triage is part of that final, component. When it comes to the idea of fixing and adapting, uh, it goes back to the idea of processing, checking off boxes, et cetera, in the world of productivity and such. I feel like people don't spend enough time there. They let it sit and then they move on to the next thing. And again, it's the compiling of things until it's. I often will allude to it as like I've got so many things going on, and then all of a sudden you try to fix them, but now you're untangling holiday lights. There's just so many of them. When you set the holiday lights up, they're fine. Then you go put them away for the season, come back, like, how did these get all tangled up? What do you say to those that get to those first four and then the fifth they're like they just don't spend enough time there?
Here's the thing about fix and adapt. Now, if you notice in the model, fix and adapt follows measurement accountability.
Yeah.
So we're measuring, are we doing this? And if we're not, if there's a problem, okay, if something didn't work and there's a problem, fix and adapt. The biggest word on there, besides focus on the right things, is quickly.
Mm.
Quickly. And what you just said, it gets to the why. Every plan you'll ever do, you'll run into problems and mistakes and failures. All right. That's what business and performance is about. Here's the thing, that's just a problem. Problems are asking you to fix them. And that's what leaders do and high performers do. We fix problems. We do that. Nothing wrong with that. Way to go. Now you're back on track. But if you let a problem go unattended to, it's going to happen again because the root cause has not been fixed. It's going to happen again. And now you no longer have a problem. You have a pattern. Very important in performance research. So, like New Year's resolution, you're going to get up early and work out. One morning you wake up, God, we had a real party last night. And you sleep in. That's fine. Everybody misses a day. Here's what the research shows. On the second day, when that alarm goes off, if you do it again, the percentage of people that hit their goals just starts to, and after 3, you might as well wait till next year.
Yeah.
Because here's what's happening. Patterns are mutations from the plan, which is the DNA. And once you have a mutation and you alter DNA, mutations in DNA creates identity. So now you are no longer the person that missed a workout. You're the person that doesn't work out. Or you're not the company that missed a product launch. You're the company that misses product launches. So when you're talking about fixing and adapting stuff, it's so crazy how the collective wisdom of thousands of years has always had this in its collective unconscious. Nip it in the bud.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nip it in the bud. I learned that one of my hobbies is I love dog training. And I've always had big working breeds, German Shepherds, Rottweilers, Doberman, and nip it in the bud. And I learned that in dog training, which actually really is good for parenting.
I'm actually just listening to a podcast called What Went Wrong. It's a great podcast about movies and how movies are made. And one of the things that the most recent episode, the one that dropped today as we're recording this, is about Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And the premise of that entire film, the original, the 1971, is if you don't get your children quote trained properly as children, there's a window. If you wait beyond that window, it's too late. So, and you can see that with the different children in that movie, like Charlie's, like but all the other kids spoiled, like all that. They said your window is very short, so you're not far off there. If you wait too long, it's very hard to
Well,
train them beyond that.
it is, and I'm glad you said very hard because you can fix it. That's why we
Yes.
had treatment centers, right?
Yep.
I've spent decades fixing bad patterns, but you're exactly right. Here's the window that you're talking about. The concrete is still wet. It hasn't formed into a structure. And so the structures in our brains are neurological wiring that behavior runs on. So whatever gets repeated gets stronger and gets focused. And it's like the water. I think I put this in the book. The water that comes down off your roof in a storm is too much for the gutter. If it happens 3 or 4 days, it's going to dig a new trench. And now this doesn't even go down your gutter anymore. You got, Lake Erie sitting there in your backyard because a new pattern got formed.
Yeah.
That's why you want to do this stuff quickly. But you can change it. I mean, concrete hardens what we do. We come with a jackhammer, we bulldoze it up and we redo it. That's usually called hitting bottom in somebody's life.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yep.
can redo it, but you don't want to go through that pain.
No, and it takes a lot more to my house is literally partly on a rock. And if we were to jackhammer part of it, it's not just the jackhammering, it's then you're going to have to polish it. And so like, it's not, whereas if it's still moldable concrete, you can still do all that while it's wet. This has
This
been a
is
great,
one of
yeah,
the great companies that I've seen. You kind of think it's almost crazy how deep the attention they pay to the onboarding process.
yeah, yeah. Have you read The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath, where they talk about the John Deere experience right out of the gate, where it's like, oh, it's just,
I've actually heard them speak a few times. It's great, but
yeah,
I don't think I've read them.
they talk about the onboarding process there. And I used to work for Costco for a number of years. There's a great example of a company that, like, number one, they do great onboard. Number two, they're incredibly malleable, right? Like because they have again, speaking of overchoice and stuff, they focus on that's how they're successful. They've been very, very deliberate about what they've done. And they've had some hiccups along the way, but their new CEO is in there
That's
and
no
all that stuff.
problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody gets right. I have one client company spends $100 million a year on individual coaching for their top leaders.
Wow. Wow. That's impressive. This has been a great conversation. Thanks so much for taking the time.